Thank you very much. Am I audible? Can you hear me well? Okay, perfect. That was quite a long introduction. I don't think it has to be that long, but yeah, thank you very much for having me today. It was great to hear you, sir, before me. The topic which has been given to me today is building the intelligent enterprise with cloud and AI. Uh, and what I'm going to start with is this chart. Uh, you believe it or not, in if you look at the era which started from COVID until 2025, this is just 5% of incidences on a particular slide. If you talk about 2019 when the COVID started, or if you go ahead and talk about the Suez Canal obstruction, or if you talk about the evolution of Chat GPT to the massive wildfires, the biggest ever wildfire which happened across the world, and probably we are talking about the tariff wars now, and finally the geopolitical tensions. I think it just covers 5% of that, and it brings us one theme in common, and which is nothing but disruption. And when we talk about disruption, it is very important that we understand our business, the way it is going to look like in 2025. So it is important that we understand what are the key themes, or let's say the key lookouts for 2025. So when we started looking at it, the global economic growth is going to be one of the biggest key theme. Now, when you look at your own organization, for that matter, across the globe, it is important that we understand how the global economy is going to grow. Of course, with the tariff wars happening these days, the geopolitical tensions across the globe, it is becoming a problem, and that's where companies are revisiting their revenues, their top lines, bottom lines every single day. And that brings me to the second lookout, which is going to be around the geopolitical conflicts. We never anticipated a war between Israel and Iran, but it has happened now, and you never know what's going to come up next. So there are certain geopolitical tensions which we cannot assume, so to say, and that's where it is going to bring us some surprising factor in there, and therefore we need to be prepared for that, and that becomes another key challenge. The third one is trade tensions and localization. 20 years ago, we talked about offshoring. Maybe 5 years ago, we talked about nearshoring, and now we are talking about reshoring. And what that essentially means is, if you look at your supplier base, if they are coming from a place where the war is happening or where the tariffs are going to hit those particular set of suppliers, then you're going to face certain issues in your production, or your prices are going to go higher and higher, and you will become lesser competitive in the market. For that matter, you will lose or you will erode on your profits, or for that matter, your revenues are going to go down, and that is the impact. Now, you might not even be looking at the impact, but let's say if there are suppliers who are based in a particular country where you might say, well, the tariff doesn't harm them, but you do not know the supplier of that supplier is in a country where the tariffs are going to make an issue for them, and therefore the product is going to become even more competitive or lesser competitive in the market, depending upon where the supplier is. And finally, AI and automation, and I think this is what we are talking about. A lot of people here in the room, we continue to talk about, and believe me, when I go and I speak to my customers, and if I ask them, the government of India 5 years, 7 years ago, during the time of COVID, they came out with the mandate of e-invoicing. How many of you have started doing that? Do you have a system which actually does e-invoicing, sends 5 legitimate bar-coded copies back into your own ERP? Does that happen with you? And believe me, almost 70% of the customers say, no, we have not started. And that's where the biggest gap is coming from. When you look at AI, why shall my people actually start making those invoices or do those credit notes and debit notes? Why can't the system do it themselves? And that's where AI is going to come into picture. Now, when we ask similar set of questions back to a CEO, and we ask them, if you are a CEO, what are the top priorities at your end? And we basically are referring to a survey by Gartner. The CEO said, growth, of course, is top of my head. I need to get growth into the organization. That is up 25%. You won't believe the CEO for the first time has given the highest marks to technology related innovations which can be brought to the company, which was never the case. It used to be top 5, top 7, but this is right at number 2. This is where the things are changing. The cost management again is becoming a bigger factor. Are you controlling your costs well? If you are controlling your costs well, fair enough, it works for you. If you are not, then you're not competitive in the market, and that's where it becomes difficult as well. Now, if you look at from the CEO's lens, now if you go and look at the other personas, so for example, if I ask a CFO, what are your top priorities for 2024 and 25? And they would say matrix, analytics and reporting, very basic, very basic. Can I get the information first on my desk? If I get the information, analytics, then I can make some strategy, some plan. And that's where, again, the things are changing. If you look at AI adoption in finance, that's number 4. And let me ask you a question. Do you have a system in your company right now where you can actually write to your agentic AI, for that matter, a sort of a command which can be given in simple language back to your system to tell them, can you get me your cash flows for the last 6 months, or give me a forecasted cash flow for the next 4 months? If you are not doing that, then we are not equipped enough, and we are literally living real time. We are not living in the future also, and that's where AI is becoming the focus as well. If you ask the same question from CPO, they are looking at it very differently as well. So they are saying strategic sourcing and leveraging spend, basically looking out for new suppliers, innovating on the supplier base is my key priority, or for that matter, identifying and mitigating supplier risk. Now, if I ask you a question today, how many of your suppliers are risky in your total supply chain? Do you have an answer? So how many of your suppliers are going to be bankrupt in the next 6 months? Can you predict? And these questions become prevalent in the sense that if I don't have an answer, I am living by chance. And during vulnerable times, living by chance can be very dangerous. And this is something we have witnessed. A lot of companies have shut down bases of where they were operating. And this has happened in India as well. If you ask the same question from a CHRO, if you look at the top priorities, what they have, and I'm going to pick up the one, strategic workforce planning. Many times we know how many people are there in my company, but how many people are there working with you, not on your payroll, maybe on the payroll of an agency, or these people are basically in your office like a peon, but actually working as a contingent labor. A report by Hackett says 40% of that money goes to people who are not on your rolls, and we conveniently forget them because we feel one peon just takes, say, 10,000 rupees of salary. That's pretty low, I don't care about that. But then you forget how many of them are actually hovering around every single day. You ask a bank, if any one of you are from a bank, if I ask a bank how many people are there in all your branches across India, just India, or maybe a state where you have employed a lot of peons, can you give me a number? And what is the spend corresponding to them? You will be surprised to hear there will be no answer, because we don't track that. Or even if we track that, we don't have data with us. For that matter, if you fire a particular person from one particular location, how will you ensure that that person is not going to the other location and getting hired again? You will have no idea. And therefore, strategic workforce planning becomes very, very important. Now, if you go to the CSCO, the priorities which they are actually having, the chief of supply chain, they are saying what is important is I need to ensure that the material is there in the organization, and that's what it is. The supply disruption, that can actually kill us. If supply disruption is there, the material is not there, I can't even produce. If I can't produce, of course, I can't go to the market, and that makes life more miserable out of this. And therefore, what they say is, if you remember, we always used to say, control your inventory. Maybe 10 years ago. After COVID came in, everybody said, build inventories. Now, after the geopolitical tensions, we are building the inventories further on. What that essentially means is we are clogging our cash flow, or the capital is getting stuck. And therefore, that is becoming a problem for the CFO, but the chief of supply chain doesn't care about that. If you don't have the material, you can't produce. So he needs to get the material in. And that becomes the challenge going forward for a chief of supply chain. If you ask a CIO similarly, the CIO thinks about it very differently. He says there are about 29% organization which are actually in a foundational AI phase 1 where there is no formal process. So they are doing something or the other without making a program to test something on AI in the organization, and they are actually in the foundational phase. But if you look at the purposeful AI, this number is, wherever there is a centralized committee, you basically would see that this number is going up to 36%. And that's where it means that if you do not have any program to start AI in your organization, you are going to get into an issue wherein people would start to realize we are not innovating enough. And if we are getting there, if there is no defined program, it won't be purposeful. That means we will build something, but it might not be of use to people out there. And that's what the CIO would think about. Now, if we look at the entire CXO grid together, the CEO basically gives you a simple statement, and that says, you need to enhance my stakeholder value. That's it. That's the most important prerogative, I would say, of a CEO. And it means very different things for very different CXOs. So if you look at the CFO, he would say, I need to steer the transformation, balancing both growth and profitability. Basically, your top line, bottom line, they both have to be managed. It can't be just one of the factors. If you look at a CPO, they're looking at cost, they're looking at sustainability. If a PO goes out from your organization as of today, how many of you can tell me, against the purchase of every line item, how much scope 3 pollution you have done? Do you have any data around this? If you do not have, SEBI has already launched BRSR. What that essentially means is you need to have a hold, a control, a reporting onto your sustainability parameters. If you don't do that, you will be out of the mid cap. If you're out of the mid cap, your company values go down, because people then can't buy share on basically the Sensex or Nifty. What it essentially means is your shareholder value goes down. So CPO then becomes very important, because he needs to get you those sustainability parameters in the form of a report, and by the way, it's a regulatory obligation as well. Or a COO would run the resilient supply chain. A CHRO would look at talent, a CRO would look at the customer expectations are rising every day, how basically those expectations can be met, and finally a CIO would say, I'm going to actually give you some AI powered mechanism, because that is what is happening right now across the globe. If you look at the new unicorns or sunicorns in the tech space, almost 80 of 100 are based on AI as of today. When we go ahead, you would get an AI use case in every sunicorn or unicorn out there. And what that essentially means is AI is becoming the DNA of the entire community around technology, and that is very, very important to understand. Now, when we look at this, there are 6 distinct strategic imperatives every single day we are working towards in the room, including myself, yourself. There is growth, profitability, risk coverage, sustainability, compliance, and finally employee experience. And if you divide them into basically multiple channels, what we are essentially saying, for example, we are talking about employee experience. Let's say I'm traveling from one place to the other. Let's say I came from my house to this particular place today. Do you have a system in your organization, before I reach to my destination, my travel report and my expense report is filed automatically by the system? I don't even get into the system. So by the time I came here, I ended my tour, my expense report is filed. Do you do that? Similarly, if you look at the sustainability part of it, do you have the ESG reporting already, which you can give back to the SEBI, for that matter, in the format defined by BRSR? Or if you are looking at compliance, if you remember the Brooklyn Bridge, which collapsed in UK because the ship actually hit them. Now consider the loss which the insurance company has to bear. It is more than $6 billion. That $6 billion is essentially the worth of a lot many companies taken together in perspective. Remember, if there is a comma or a dot missing in that contract which was signed with the insurance company, how much would the company endure which was actually handling the shipping corporation? And that's where the contract management becomes very important. So are you doing your contract management, your compliance better in the organization? Do you do obligation management carefully inside the organization? Do you have AI tools to actually write a contract for you? And similarly, on the profitability side of it, how are you doing your cost control? Are you looking at alternative vendors? Are you looking at nearshoring? For that matter, tax compliance back to the government of India or your own auditors. Is there a system which is actually doing it for you? And if the tax is not getting complied, the system is raising an alert instead of you depending upon people to say whether it will happen or not happen. And I think if we keep all of this in mind, this brings us to what SAP can do for you. And we are revamping the entire game very clearly. We are talking about at the base a transactional system, an ERP which you basically have with you already, let's say in some form and shape, and that transactional system is recording everything for you from your procurement data to a sales data to a employee data to your travel and expense data and whatnot. And those data have to then make sense, and that's where we get transformational insights. Remember that the data which I have with me will remain data only if I can't make sense out of it. If I can make sense out of it, it becomes information. And if I have information, I can make some analytics out of it that will tell me that I can actually perform certain actions to ensure that I bring compliance or cost management or spend management back to my organization. And finally, why shall I do it now? Why there can't be an AI which it can do for me? For example, if I need to run an RFP, a request for proposal, and that is something, if there are any procurement professionals in the room or IT professionals, they would do it every day. Why can't the AI create an RFP for me? Why shall I do it now? We used to do it 30, 40, 50 years ago. Why now in this age? AI should actually build an RFP for me and roll it out to the suppliers automatically. And I should actually tell the AI, this is how it needs to be done. For that matter, if I'm looking at an interface like Siri, when I can tell something to Siri and she can respond, I can do the same thing in my system, in my organization. And that's where I would say AI should actually be able to give a lot of insights and do a lot of transactional work for me, which I'm doing on a very regular basis, every single day, every single hour. And that is where SAP's vision comes to life, which is looking like this. You have a business technology platform where you're building a lot of apps, a lot of data, consider this as an open system where you can build a lot of layers of data and machine learning for yourself. On top of that, we will have the business data cloud, which is essentially getting all this data into a meaningful format and getting analytics out of it. On top of that, we have cloud ERP. Whatever I spoke until now, if you can do it in your organization, very good, congratulations to you. But if you can't, this is what we can do. So the cloud ERP basically gets you the answer of whatever we spoke just now in the last 10, 15 minutes. And finally, on top of the cloud ERP, you have niche areas which are related to, say, spend management or finance management or supply chain management, your human capital management or customer experience for that matter. On top of that, we are basically having the business AI powered, and we call it Joule. So basically you have a prompt and you tell Joule, can you tell me the status of this employee? If this employee still exists in our company, if yes, where is he or she? What was his last drawn salary? For that matter, is this his second innings? He went out of this company and came back into the company. Or similarly, you can ask, what is the status of this PO? You don't even need to get into the system, and that's where we are getting at. So, in a summary, what I would say is the disruption is happening with AI and cloud, and that is what we are bringing to life together. And of course, there are multiple customers. I don't need to explain that, but one figure I will just leave it with you. Around 77% of global GDP touches an SAP system somewhere. So if you're sitting here today, and if you started your day, say 3 hours ago or 2 hours ago, you would have touched an SAP system somewhere as of today itself in the last 4 hours. And that is what I would leave you with. So thank you very much. That was my time. I hope it was good. If there are any questions I can answer, otherwise I'm here. We can continue. Thank you very much.